Hey y'all, happy Juneteenth if you're watching this right now, but if you're catching it later, I hope you had a happy Juneteenth. Well, my name is Shameika Rhymes and this is Soulibration. I always try to do like a little dance move. So come on in and share where you're watching from. Let me know, were you off today? What'd you do today to celebrate Juneteenth? Be sure to share this video with those that you think may need it because tonight we're continuing the conversation from last week about therapy and dating. Last week, we touched on the reasons why you may need to go to therapy between relationships and situationships. But tonight, we're taking a look at healing, boundaries, and self-esteem in relationships. So make sure you put your questions and comments in the chat, and we'll try to answer them throughout the show. So let me tell you who's back to join us this week. Licensed therapist Paul Bache Williams. He's a licensed clinical social worker, psychotherapist, keynote, relationship advisor, business owner, corporate consultant. He has a couple books out there that y'all need to pick up: The Father's Journal and Dear Future Wife, A Man's Guide and a Woman's Reference to Healthy Relationships. And his counseling services can be found at www.heartsandmindcounseling.com. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here again. I had a fun last time. Looking forward to a great segment.
All right. And also joining us again this week, we have Reagan Adams. She's originally from Knoxville, Tennessee. I love that accent. She's an event planner and self-care advocate, now based in Houston, Texas. She founded All Things Reagan, an umbrella for her various initiatives. And among those are the Build a Man Workshop, a vision board project based on helping women attract their ideal partners through personal growth, and Dating is Dead, Who Killed It? It's a panel discussion exploring modern relationship dynamics with the help of relationship coaches and therapists. Welcome, Reagan.
Thank you so much for having me back. I appreciate it.
We're missing Will tonight, but he had to work, so we'll continue on without him. So we're going to kick this off right, talking about boundaries, because I know myself that is a key word in my life right now. So, Paul, why are boundaries crucial in dating, and how can therapy assist in setting them?
They're very crucial in understanding yourselves. Like, boundaries are a security system, right? We use them to protect ourselves. And sometimes we use them to protect ourselves from ourselves because we lack boundaries. And a lot of times we learn boundaries from our families. And you think about the way you were raised, you think about your household. Was there a lack of boundaries? Did mom or dad invade your space? Did you have no privacy? Did they not teach you how to set boundaries? So if you grew up like that, you're going to dating, you might not know what boundaries look like inappropriate conversations or investigating things that shouldn't be anything that had to do with you, right? Not being able to have secure and honest and open conversations, right? If we lack boundaries, we also give people access to parts of us that they don't need to have access to at a certain period of time. So we need to really learn how to protect ourselves as we grow in relationships.
When you said things that you shouldn't be investigating, what you talk about?
So you think about earlier, right? I think sometimes we have inappropriate conversations too soon.
Okay.
Sometimes that's based on our history, based on our own trauma, and we might be investigating something behind their backs instead of asking a question. I see that a lot early dating. People investigating their social media, investigating, looking up things, and they are afraid to have conversation. They might, we talked about last week, they might just ghost them because they didn't have the conversation.
Gotcha. Because I thought when you said investigate, my mind went to how some people are going through people's phones and things that don't belong to them, trying to find something. Because what happens when you go looking, sometimes you find what you were looking for.
That too.
Reagan, what boundaries did you not have in place before therapy? And what boundaries did you put in place after going through therapy when it comes to dating?
I'm still trying to figure out what boundaries are, even though I've been through therapy. It's weird because I have a hard time setting them for different people. So I'm cool on some aspects, like, no, I'm not doing this. This is what I expect, X, Y, and Z. And then sometimes it's like, don't think I want to do that because I don't want to hurt their feelings, but I don't care about it over here, but over here I do. So I'm still actually trying to work on that, actively working on setting boundaries now, because I'm not good at it. I'm going to be honest. It's not.
Paul, can you tell us how you set boundaries? Because I'm like with Reagan, I'm good maybe with career stuff, sometimes setting boundaries, but over here with dating, those boundaries
Yes.
kind of dissolve.
Yeah.
It's because you're those are two different relationships, right? But if you set universal boundaries, people have to honor them, right? We teach people how to love us. We teach people how to show up and treat us, right? If I have a universal boundary is expectation and how I show up, then everybody's going to have to navigate around that. They're going to just have to honor them, right? And that's how we can grow in our relationships. That's how we can stay connected. Because if I don't honor my boundaries, why would anybody else honor them? And you have to ask yourself, what is the real struggle with setting boundaries with the people you can't, right? Are you afraid that you'll lose them? You're afraid that the things that you need to honor yourself will cause them to walk away? Well, if that's the case, then they're not meant to be there in that space. But if somebody really wants to be in your space, they'll learn how to honor and learn how to grow with you in relationship.
Ooh, okay. That was eye-opening right there because okay, so the next to layer on top of that, how do you know what your boundaries are? Like what if because like, Reagan and I both are kind of like, how do we set those boundaries? But we need to know what those boundaries are. I know my therapist just gave me an 11-page worksheet to work through, and I discovered some things about myself, but I don't know any therapist that I had before never did that. So I'm just now learning how to find my boundaries, but how would someone else that doesn't have a therapist maybe learn how to find out what their boundaries are?
So look at the different domains in your life, right? You have physical, you have psychological, you have emotional, you have spiritual, you have sexual, you have all the different boundaries that you have. What's comfortable for you? And why is that comfortable? What's uncomfortable for you? And why is that uncomfortable? Explore that, right? And if this doesn't work for you, then you have to be strong enough to say that this doesn't work for you, right? And sometimes we bend our boundaries to allow people in. But again, you're giving them access to things that you're not necessarily ready for or they're not ready for. Like I have a good friend who talks about they physically describe the boundaries as somebody across the street, then somebody that's in the lawn, somebody's on the porch, somebody's that's in the living room. You have people who are able to get in the kitchen, right? They can cook, you can eat. Then you have people who are able to go upstairs. The people who are really close to you are the people that are in your bedroom, right? And that doesn't mean sexual. That means like people who are really close. Your deep, darkest secrets. You're able to really share with them vulnerability and transparency.
Okay, we have a question from Shelly Morris. She says, what if you have a mate who doesn't set boundaries with his family, who is always involved in his life and relationships? Ooh, that's a good one, Paul.
I mean, I see it all the time. Again, when we're dealing with family, the challenge is it's not your responsibility to set the boundaries, right? You have to express that to your partner and let them know what's comfortable for you, right? Because once you get into a relationship, you see an enmeshment with family, right? How much of that can you handle? How much of that is too intrusive, right? They have to learn how to set the boundaries because once that relationship becomes a marriage, they're no longer in control of what happens in your household. So if they want to continue to have dysfunction and disruption and fights and all the different things that cause trauma in your relationship, then let that family in, right? And that's you have to decide what do you want to deal with. Do you want to deal with the trauma inside your home, or you want to deal with the trauma outside your
home? Ooh, okay. Reagan, have you dealt with anybody that has had those they can't set boundaries with their families?
Let me tell you, because I was actually going to go into a question for Paul about cutting off, because I'm extremely quick to cut people off. And I think I came up with a revelation that I knew, but I just didn't kind of come to grips with because I dealt with my ex-husband for so long. And it's like now if I see any little thing, it's like, I'm out of here. And so to answer your question, no, because if I see any inkling of something like that, somebody getting in my business, or I cut it off immediately. But my question to Paul is, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
How can I get out of the mode to actually give people a chance? Because like, I get excited, like, okay, if I have a date or I've met somebody, I'm like, oh my gosh, he's got these great characteristics. I'm excited, blah, blah, blah. And then the next day I'm just like, not interested anymore, and it's over with. How can I get out of that to give people a chance to actually get to know them without just throwing it all in and then just out the next day?
Well, ask yourself, is it really them or is it you? Right? Because somebody can show up with all the things that you like, and you can still have some wounds that are open, or you can still have this idea that I'm not ready for a relationship, even though I want one. So is it them or is it you? Because again, the red flags are opportunities for conversation, right? Because you said you gave your ex-husband so many chances. Now you feel like you can't give anybody any chances because you're still having parts of you that are still connected to that marriage. So you don't want to relive that trauma, but it doesn't mean that going into a new experience, you're going to have the same experience. So have the conversation and really check yourself and kind of sit with yourself and say, is this them or is this me?
Yeah, I think it might be both, but a little bit more of me. But we're going to work on that. Thanks, Paula. I appreciate that. Thanks, Shameika, for letting me ask a question.
Yeah. If you have a question throughout, make sure, well, people watching, drop it in the comments. Reagan, feel free to chime in whenever you have a question. But I wanted to piggyback on this because I'm curious as to how long, say you're getting out of whether it is a situationship or relationship, how long should it take you to get over it? Like, because to deal with all those things that you're carrying from that relationship, as far as like, like Reagan said, she gave her ex-husband all these chances, but like, how long should it take you to kind of say, let me pause, try to heal this before I jump into something else? Or is it okay to just proceed into something else?
I think everybody's different, but I
Okay.
definitely think that you do need to take some type of time, right? Because you don't want to have layover, right? You don't want to carry over what you're previously experiencing. And I was working with a couple before, and they were afraid that after a relationship dissolved prior to them, that they were going to be a rebound, right? And they were like, oh, I don't want to be a rebound. And I said, what's wrong with a rebound?
Oh, wait a minute. Now what? Okay, go ahead.
Always have negative connotations or negative sayings that we can say to. And a rebound in basketball is a good thing because you got the ball, right? And so now you have an opportunity to have a relationship back. So So I'm going to eliminate this person just because they're next. That doesn't make any sense, right? And so we have these things that block us from making connection with people because of somebody else's idea of what this is supposed to be. But ultimately, again, I think it's really depends on the person, right? If I need to take a year off, I'll take a year off, right? If I need to take 6 months off, I'll take 6 months off. If I really want to work on myself and I want to set goals for myself, then set the goals for yourself. But in that time that you might set a year, you might meet someone. Does that automatically mean that you're not going to pursue them or allow yourself to be pursued? Investigate, develop a relationship, right? And then you can see if you want to go to that romantic level. But don't eliminate the opportunity just to become friends and develop a connection.
Okay. All right. So the next question, how can therapy, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, but how can therapy address intimacy issues when it comes to dating? Because sometimes people have been sexually assaulted or abused and or whatever the issue is, or maybe it's some kind of trigger that if somebody's getting close, it's like, no, wait. And and then you throw in your attachment issues. Help, Paul.
Yes, please, Paul. Thanks.
Well, I would definitely say you definitely need to work on that individually, right? You need to be working with a specialist who specializes in sex therapy or trauma, sexual assault, all the things that you really have a challenge to deal with, right? You cannot really go into it yourself and see like I'm automatically healed, I'm okay. And you also have to be vocal about your boundaries, right? You have to tell your partner this doesn't feel good to you. And be okay with saying that, because that's when we talk about boundaries, because they need to be able to honor your boundaries and honor your body. Like if you've been through something and something triggers you, you're automatically going to have this reaction, and they're going to sense that and they're going to feel that as well. So tell people what you're not comfortable with. It's okay. and they're going to have to work around that. And you guys can work on it together if you get to that point.
Okay. I'm curious, Reagan, do you know your attachment style?
Listen. Yes, and I think it's is it dismissive or avoidant?
Avoid.
Avoidant detachment. Yeah. Like I
Hmm.
said, I'm quick to avoid. I don't like tough conversations. I will drop something in 2.3 seconds and act like it never happened. I'm really good about that.
Hmm.
But I kind of wanted to piggyback or go back to the intimacy. That
Hmm.
is the absolute main reason that I saw my therapist.
Okay.
Um, I was molested by two men and two women.
Mm.
So I start when, like, I'm not a hugger, but when I would hug women, I wouldn't want them to touch my breasts. So it's
Yeah.
just kind of like when people, like, all my friends are huggers, so they're like, come here, Reagan. And I'm like, don't touch me.
Yeah.
And then I remember when I was dating this guy, he was like, give me a hug. And he like gave me this bear hug. And I was just standing with my arms down, like, I didn't know what to do. And I said, I got to go get some help because I do want to get married again, but I'm not touchy feely. But apparently, I'm still dealing with this thing. And then when I went to like, I had to go through a few therapists, but one, I knew she wasn't my person because I was like, look, I have intimacy issues. Like,
Hmm.
I want to get married again. You know, I've been molested. So I know what my problem is, but I need to know how to navigate this. So I can, you know, especially if my partner has a love language, you know, to be touched, like I want to be able to honor that, but I just can't in the space I'm in. And she was like, nope, that's just how you are. Don't worry about it. And I said, okay, this is not my therapist
Yeah.
because I know what the problem is. I need some help navigating it. So you're right, Paul, when you say like you really have to be honest with what's going on with you too, because some people don't want to revisit things that happened in their past, but really that's how we operate in our past is how we're going to go forward in our relationship. So we gotta fix those things quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Reagan. Because there may be some other people that have had that same or similar experience. And like, I think by you sharing that you went to therapy to address it may help somebody.
And the stats say that I think it's 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 women have experienced some type of sexual assault, and 1 in 7 men have experienced sexual assault. That's reported, right? You imagine how many people haven't shared that they've experienced that. So we've all, especially in our community, it happens all the time, unfortunately. And we're just walking around. We normalize it, we minimize it. When people share, kids share, they're minimized. Don't disrupt the family. You know, it's so many different things that are so unfortunate and disruptive and dysfunctional in our communities.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, Let me pause for a second to remind the viewers, drop your comments in the chat, any questions, and let us know as we continue this conversation. Paul, do you suggest that people find out what their attachment style is and the issues that may stem from those attachment styles, or should you also know your love language?
Yeah, definitely attachment styles. I think that's a part of self exploration, right?
Mhm.
We need to know ourselves. We need to know the ins and outs and how we show up in our single selves and how we're going to show up in our relationships. So if I know that my attachment style is disorganized, right? The disorganized attachment style is a person who, at one moment, they want to be close, right? They're anxious about the attachment. And then another time, they want to be autonomous or they want to be dismissive or they just want to be avoidant, right? That's the organized. Secure is a person who doesn't have insecurities, but they know how to address them in a relationship. So they're able to really talk about them. The avoidant, as Reagan said, is they just avoid the tough conversations, right? Anything's just close. There's this fear there. If I get too close, I'm going to get hurt. So I'm going to avoid. And the anxious is the one that's really always concerned about the relationship. Like, is everything? Did I do this right? Do you still like me? Like they consistently need the reassurance, and
Mhm.
they do things to kind of disrupt the normalcy. Like, you can just be hanging out and everything. When one partner might think everything is fine, and it was like, "Are you all right?" Yeah, we're eating fries. Like, it's
But you started chewing different.
right. So you're constantly investigating that. But also love languages. I mean, there's really no scientific connection to love languages. Is somebody
Okay.
up? It's fun and we can play with it, right? But I think about love languages, like for me myself, like words of affirmation. I
Mhm.
love it because I'm a writer, right? I love words of affirmation, but I don't want to hear a lot of stuff from a lot of different people, right?
Yeah.
Some people it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Right.
There's two sides to everything, right? If I strictly hold on to words of affirmation, if I'm telling you I'm scared, I'm anxious, I didn't do well, and you're coming to me and saying you look scared, you look anxious, you didn't do well,
Yeah.
then you're affirming that negative connotation I have of myself. But when you get with the right partner, your love languages shift, right?
Mhm.
Shift, and you might have all the love languages. Some days you might want to have physical touch. Some days you want the acts of service. So it just really depends on the connection you have with the person.
Okay. I'm
That's
about to throw
exactly
this.
what I was going to say, that they shift. That was going to be a
Yeah.
question.
So this question just made me think of when you said that. I was thinking like about is it gift giving or something like that as one of the love languages or something. But anyway, I was wondering, and this is for both of you, how important is is it when dating in someone's finances? Is is that a huge deal? Like maybe they're in a space and they're, I know last week Will mentioned that there was a point where he was going through like some changes and for him, he just kind of ghosted. But I'm just curious. I know I just wanted to continue that segment of that conversation and just say how important is someone's finances, credit score, all those things, especially if you're just dating.
I'll let you go first, right?
It must look like I have a lot to say.
Yes.
So, um, you know what? I would say it's weird. I'm kind of weird in that aspect. So when I first moved to Houston, and it's almost been 2 years ago, I my credit was cool. I quit my job and I was actually Ubering. That's all I was doing and working my business.
Mhm.
And then these real bills hit because Houston, there's different from Knoxville.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay. And then I felt like I don't think I can date because here I am. I was 44. Hey, what do you do? Well, I drive Uber. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're 44. What are we doing? So it's like, even though I made more money Ubering than I did with the job that I was at for 16 years, that still doesn't sound like you got your stuff together, right?
Mhm.
So I avoided a lot of dating during that time. So now that I have a pretty good job, and I'm working back on my stuff, I think even we have to show grace in that area,
Yeah.
because anything can happen at any time. I don't care how old you are. You can lose your job. You can lose, anything can happen. So before my answer would be, he got to have more than me. Because I've always like I used to date drug dealers for, I don't know if we can say that on here, but it's out anyway. But I would always date people who had a lot, guys or married who had a lot more money than me. And my father, he took care of me. So I was used to sitting in that seat. So I would
Mhm.
not date anybody that had less than me. But now that I've, grown and I've seen, hey, anything can happen, you have to show grace. And so what I look at now is, does this person, and I'm going to say potential, already moving in the potential, already doing some things, has
Yeah.
stability, has their own thing or the wherewithal to do where we can grow. And that's what I'm looking at now. Before it was a no. Yeah, I'll leave it there because I was going to say something else and it would probably contradict what I just said. So we'll leave it.
Say it.
Let it all out. Let it all out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so personal experiences, and I talked about this many times on social media. It's different for men,
Mhm.
society-wise, right? We're expected and we're kind of groomed to not date until we have a certain status and certain amount of money. And I never really believed that because how can I neglect an opportunity for connection, love, if I'm strictly focused on money and then when I get the money and then I'm trying to have a relationship with a woman and I'm not emotionally connected because I've neglected my emotions this whole time, right? I
Mhm.
don't think that's realistic. And it's all about how do you manage your money. I don't think it's about how much you have, right? Because I've
Mhm.
had a time I dated someone who made double than I did, starting out fresh social worker, just graduating. I didn't make a lot. But I had my finances, credit score was good. I had my finances in order. I had my own place. I had a car. I had a job. Had my son in private school. I was doing well for myself. But I knew my trajectory was going to be at this certain level. But in her eyes, she saw a social worker and she was like, social workers don't make any money.
Ooh.
So, I mean, that's traditionally what people think, right? But I didn't let that stop me from where I was going. She always made little comments, and I eventually ended the relationship because I'm not competing with you and I'm not insecure about how much I make. I don't know how much she makes now. I don't, it doesn't really matter, but I never allowed that to stop me from dating. Now, if I'm bad with money, if I'm going to the date and I'm asking you to pay because I magically left my wallet at home,
Mhm.
or things are constantly happening where I'm not paying my bills, you come into my house, my light is off, my lights are off, then that's a problem, right? If
Yeah.
you're able to manage the money that you have, then I would say get that together, get that in order before you start to date.
Okay. Because I see a lot of people on this dating show I watch on social media that I don't want to say the name of, but I see a lot of people, men and women, get on there. They're like they don't have a job, but and then people in the comments attack them. But obviously they seem to be taking care of themselves. But again, I just didn't know well, obviously the things in the comments, people what they think, but this is helpful what you two have said, especially as you get older. I think your viewpoints change. Um, Paul, how does self-esteem affect dating experiences, and what role does therapy play in boosting it? And what are some signs of low self-esteem and not realizing your worth?
Well, first, I think Reagan had a comment.
Oh, okay.
I did, because listen, I was going to forget. I was
Okay,
going
go ahead.
to forget. What I wanted to say to Paul's point is, I believe a lot of women nowadays, because they do make really good money, more
Mhm.
so than they did before. They lead with that in relationships. So my thing is, if the girl was smart, like, she will see, okay, this is where you are now. You're already walking in that. If she has, and you've shown the wherewithal, then she can come alongside of you and help boost whatever you have going on. And
Mhm.
what people don't understand is women are the help meet anyway to men. So I think that's been lost upon our generation. Um,
Mhm.
if you have somebody that's already doing something. And so I know when I get in relationships, there's no relationship that I get in that I don't help. I don't care if it's a friendship or whoever I'm dating. And so I think we need to start looking at that and quit looking at all the eyes. I can do, you don't have, so I can't. You will never be able to be in a relationship unless you're not selfish and you have a different outlook and start seeing people past the money.
Yeah.
That's a big
Ooh.
thing that I'm seeing now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
all about communication, right?
Yeah.
Because, and it's all about maturity of communication and being investigative, right? If I
Mhm.
investigate, okay, what does 5 years look like, right? We could have had a conversation about that. And also, we go back to boundaries because that sometimes we might be helping somebody that's not ready to grow, right? But that's part
Ooh.
of the conversation. That's part of the communication.
Mhm.
All about helping each other, but supporting each other as a unit. Like, what are you growing together? Like, because you don't want to be, I've seen stories where a woman wants a man to do better and he's settled in where he is. And they get into
Mhm.
that conflict because he doesn't want to grow to the trajectory that she thinks that he wants, that he wants, or he just is comfortable. And maybe that's not where she wants to go. And that's a different conversation. Like, okay, well, if we can't meet each other, then this relationship isn't for us. But if that's where you want to be, can I live with you and can I be in this relationship without this person growing? You have to really ask each other, is
Mhm.
that something that you guys can do?
Okay.
I don't
Well,
want it.
Okay.
since you go ahead, Reagan. Sorry.
No, I just said I don't want it. If he's not wanting to grow, I don't want it.
Yeah, I want it. I'm gonna go back to the self-esteem question in a second because I just thought of something else. In that situation where, say, the guy doesn't want to grow, or maybe he is trying and just things aren't working out the way he's wanting them to, insert your friends. At what point do you have to tell your friends, get out my business, or stop giving unsolicited advice, or do you just not talk to your friends about your concerns? What's y'all's advice? What do y'all think? I mean, I know what I think, but what do y'all think?
I told them last week, if I find somebody or am found by somebody and I really like them and I see potential, I'm going to keep it under wraps for a minute because I don't need the outside noise. And because they love me so much, they're kind of like my guard dogs. Like, well, I need to check him out. No, you don't. Like, it's between me, him, and God. And so when that happens, I'm keeping them out of my business. And I've already told them, don't ask because you won't know until we're close to probably getting engaged. And I'm serious about that. Very serious.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's important not to have everybody in your business, right? You might have that one trusted friend that's impartial, but eventually we always tell one side of the story, even when we're telling both sides.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want that friend to be a part of it, maybe you invite them into both of your conversation. But ultimately, you don't want that, so maybe you get a professional, right?
Right.
You want unsolicited advice, and you don't want to always be judged because when you guys are just hanging out and you're paying the tab, and you're like, "See, he ain't have no money."
Right. Right. When you gonna get a job?
Right.
You might have agreed that you would take him out that night or whatever. You guys have an agreement, but this other person's on the outside judging your interaction. So it gets very touchy when you involve other people in your relationship, friends or not.
I agree with both. Keep people out your business, except your therapist and God. Okay, going back to the self-esteem question, how does low self-esteem affect dating experiences and what role does therapy play in boosting it? And what are some signs that you may have low self-esteem or low self-worth and you just don't realize that that's the issue?
Well, self-esteem can be impacted by so many different things. Like self-esteem can be impacted by mood, self-esteem can be impacted by interaction, self-esteem can be impacted. We lose self-esteem when we're in spaces where we feel like we're not the expert, right? So that affects our self-esteem. Self-worth is like my global idea of how I am, who I am, and my self-worth. So I can walk into a room, I know I'm worthy, even if I don't have what the next person has, because I can stay in my space, right? That's impacted differently. When you think about relationships, I think sometimes we feel like we don't deserve someone who we think is healed more than us or has more than us when they're actually choosing us for the characteristics that we have. And we need to accept that. And once we embrace that, we can have a better opportunity for a connection or a better, healthier relationship. And what also a person with good self-esteem can also talk about what they struggle with, right? And there's also a word I like to use, or phrase I like to use, is self-acceptance, right? I accept myself with flaws, with greatness, with ailments, with a bad knee, with all of that. I have self-acceptance, and that's who I want my partner to accept me as well.
Okay. Reagan, for you, I think you mentioned last week that you had some self-esteem issues, but how did that impact your relationships, like your marriage and then later on your dating life before you finally were able to work on that?
Listen, everybody, and I mean everybody that I dated, including my ex-husband, was low self-esteem, all of it. And then even some a little bit after him. You have to know who you are. You got to sit by yourself. And I'm going to tell you, the only reason I got married is because this is who we were friends with benefits, for God's sake. We never even really dated. And so we were just messing around for years. And I was like, look, I'm getting older. I already got kicked out of school a few times. I went back. I'm graduating at 27. Like, you're around, we might as well just get married. Right. And that's basically how we got married. And I thought too that I couldn't get anybody else. And when I actually came out of my mouth and said that, my friends were like, what? Like, what's going on?
I'm looking like, what? I remember you from back then. What?
Right. And that's what my friends was like, what? You can't get nobody else. And you've married this guy who sells drugs and like you're college educated, you're doing these things. And I was just like, but my dating experiences, like I can go back to childhood, situations where it was like I wasn't the one that had a lot of dating experience. Nobody talked to me about dating. That's one of the main reasons I have Dating Is Dead, Who Killed It, and The Builder Man. A lot of us weren't taught how to date. We weren't taught about marriages. We were taught, hey, don't have sex, don't get pregnant, and the diseases, but nobody talked about the emotional part that comes when you have sex. Why are you having sex? Like, we didn't talk about any of that stuff. So I was really just out here trying to figure it out, and nobody was helping me pour into myself. Like, it was a mess. So, like, trying to rectify it now, because I still have issues sometimes. But it's very, 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 long story short, important for you to be self-aware about what you got going on and getting your self-esteem together. Very, because you will make terrible dating decisions. You will make terrible friendship decisions. Terrible. You'll keep people around. You'll pick up people who you have no business being attached to. And I can write 10 books about it. 10, maybe 11.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. A lot of times we see ourselves as our weaker selves, right? Even if we progress, we still see I think about body dysmorphia, right?
Mm-hmm.
And me, like when I was out of shape, like when I was younger, I was a fat kid. I was a fat kid out of everybody, so I didn't get a lot of attention. I always had to wear tight clothes because clothes didn't fit. And even when I got in shape, worked out, I still saw myself as that fat kid. And I was constantly chasing a different body. And the same thing happens to us when we experience different things like infidelity or being cheated on, or we don't get picked or chosen. We feel like we don't fit in with the cool group. We really still deal with that, and that's how we see ourselves. So we really have to challenge that perception of our older selves and really give ourselves an opportunity to say, I'm better than that, right? And that was a time in my life where I went through a growing period, right? But I learned so much about myself. What about my personality? What else do I bring to the table? What do people like about me? What do I like about me? And we can focus on that. Then we'll start to attract the different people that we want to be in relationship with.
I like that. That's a good point. Yeah. Everybody, we only have like a few more minutes left. So if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. So Reagan, were you going to add to that as well?
No, I was just telling Papa that was good. Like that church, that's good. That's real
right. Yeah, because I think that's another aspect though, the whole body dysmorphia thing. Like I know I experienced it from having fibroids for over 10 years. When I look in the mirror, I don't have fibroids now, but when I look in the mirror, I still see that body. So that's a whole nother mental thing you have to push through. Cause I'm like, look at my closet. Oh, I'm gonna wear this. Oh, wait, it don't fit no more. Because I still think like I can still wear these things. But anyway, maybe that's a whole nother show. So Paul, how can people effectively integrate the insights that they gain from therapy into their dating life? So say they go to therapy, I don't know, for a year, maybe 2 years. How can they then take what they've learned and then put it into their dating life, put it into practice?
I think naturally we become different, right? We learn parts of ourselves, and we learn boundaries. We learn the expectations that we have for ourselves, and we implement them. I think that's essentially what we do, right? We don't go to therapy and then walk out of it and then act like it didn't happen, right? We practice self-discovery in therapy. For me, really learning about myself, again, learning about boundaries, learning about why was I so giving, learning about why was I choosing what I was choosing, a lot of insecurities, a lot of anxiety and stuff like that, and looking for a supportive partner, but really looking for someone to cover the parts that are my deficits instead of me addressing them. So once I realized that I can address them myself, I didn't need a person to cover that. I just needed somebody to compliment me, right? And so how do you get into a connection with somebody that's a compliment and somebody that doesn't cover you, right? So that's a difference.
I like that. Reagan, how have you incorporated everything you've learned from therapy and even these conversations? How are you going to incorporate it into your daily life and dating?
Girl, listen, you would have thought I went to school for therapists like I know something, and I don't. And like I'm totally healed. But I try to do the best I can. Like I said, I'm self-aware. I know what my triggers are. I know all these things, and I try to be very cognizant and use, the tools that I have been given to be able to operate, not just in, my romantic relationships, but my friendships and everyday life. Because a lot of things, I can be very rigid a lot of the time, and so I have to be mindful of that. So I try my best, like Paul said, to, learn what I can learn, bring those into the fold, and just learn about myself and try to do better every day, period.
Okay. Gosh, it's like I still have so many more questions to get there. We probably gonna need to do a part 3 one day, but this one, since we're running out of time, this one is for both of you. What advice would you give to somebody who is hesitant about starting therapy, but they're struggling in their dating life? They're just struggling all across the board. Like, would you say, "Hey, maybe you should try therapy," or what would you say to them? And whether it's somebody you know or whether it's somebody watching, what would you say?
I always lead by example, right? I talk about how I'm in therapy, right? I'm very transparent about what my struggles are, um, and I talk to them about how it helped me, even though I am a therapist. A lot of people like mirroring, so they see you doing it, and then okay, let me get intrigued and investigate, and maybe I want to get into that. For a person who's really struggling, they might come to me for answers. I was like, you may need a therapist because I can't be your therapist.
Mhm.
You're my homegirl. I
Yeah.
can't provide therapy. And you need that safe space, that private space that has the boundaries, right? Where you it doesn't get shared, right? We have different rules legally and ethically that you're protected in that space, so you can talk about whatever you want to talk about. So you can figure it out. If a bunch of different things are failing, then find out why.
Mhm. What about you, Reagan? Any advice to get someone who's hesitant about going to therapy to go to therapy?
Yeah, I'm really tough on people who come to me just in general. I had this conversation yesterday. So uh, I have a hard time giving people grace when it comes to things that they need to change in their life. And so for me, if you've been falling and slipping on your head for 25 years, I mean, what are we doing? Like, you're not, what you have been doing is not working. So
Mhm.
when I work with people, I coach them to my ability, and then a part of that is I go whatever area they're in, whatever state, I find them a therapist because you can't talk to me without one. It's a part of the
Mhm.
program. So I work alongside of them to find a match for a therapist. And I always, because I deal with women, I have the, and this may be wrong, Paul, if it is, you can say it. But what I do for women who come to me for Build a Man, I always find handsome, single therapists, male therapists, because one, they're going to want to go to their therapy appointment. Two, they're going to get not the, because men are less emotional than women. So we're not going to come in like, oh, well, it's okay. No, you've had 25 years of it's okay. We need to fix some stuff. So,
Mhm.
so far it's been working, but you can't work with me or talk to me until you go to therapy. These are people who come to me now. If you just random, I may throw it out there, but if we're working together or something, you have to go to therapy. It's a must.
Okay. Paul, I know you look like you got something to say.
I said, go ahead and
As long as everybody has boundaries, I don't want to get into what other people do.
say. Yeah.
Ethically, you want to make sure that you don't cross boundaries. You want to make sure there's been some situations that both sides have been in where there's been lines have been crossed, dual relationships, and we want to avoid that. If it's
Yeah.
working and nobody's harmed, hey,
Well, I let them know. I mean, you can see what's going on, so you don't have to be like, you'll know that I explained what's going on beforehand. But so far, I haven't had any issue, and everybody's been going to, their thing. So,
okay. You want to
Paul
kind of
still looks like, well,
the emotional aspect between men and women, I think it just shows up different, right? I think historically and what we say society wise that women are more emotional and men are more logical. I think there's a place where we can meet, right? And
Mhm.
we have a conversation and again build a relationship together.
And I think that's a great stopping point. Yes, I love that. I want to thank you both for joining me here tonight on Soulibration. We already answered the soul, what feeds your soul question, so I won't ask you again. But um, for more information on therapy and mental health and relationships, you can head over to blackdoctor.org. And as for me, I will see you guys next Wednesday at the same time for Soulibration, and we'll be talking about safety while on dating apps and dating websites. So I want all of you, including you two, to have a soul filled rest of the week. And until next time, good night.
Bye.